I caught an intruder red-handed in my kitchen. Not a burglar, not a prankster, but Evelyn Carter, the HOA president, calmly photographing my refrigerator like she owned the place. She'd used a brass key with a little red tag stamped Main 07, walked through my unlocked front door, and announced in that sweet official voice people use when they're about to ruin someone's day. This is a mandatory interior inspection. I stood there, spoon in hand, blood in my ears, and realized two terrible things at once. She'd just violated my home, and she thought she could get away with it. The first hour after Evelyn left, clipped word slammed door. A white sedan idling in my driveway feels like a lifetime now. She moved through my space with a practiced efficiency, photographing the inside of cabinets, checking under my sink, photographing the pantry shelves as if she were filling out a menu. It wasn't random snooping. It was methodical documentation. I asked for the covenant section authorizing interior access, she snarled. This is routine compliance inspection. Don't test my authority and threatened flat as a contract clause. I can fine you $500 a day. That number landed in my chest like a punch. Who does that? Who comes into your house and quotes a penalty like it's a weather forecast? That was the moment the story stopped being about a bad neighbor and started being about a system. At first, I was furious heat behind my teeth. Words I wanted to throw like plates, but I'd learned to breathe when anger wanted to write checks my brain couldn't cash. I stepped back, watched her memorize the little things: the red-tagged key, the HOA pin on her blazer, a clipboard with multiple forms, not one inspection sheet, but a stack, and the white sedan idling like a getaway car. Everything screamed practiced. Everything screamed she'd done this before. Over the next 4 days, the harassment blossomed into a campaign. 11 violation notices slid under my door or into my mailbox, each more petty than the last, each stamped with case numbers and HOA letterhead. Mailbox is 2 inches beyond the approved setback line. Driveway oil stain measuring 1.3 inches in diameter. Garden hose visible from street view during non-watering hours. The fines added up $1,850, then $3,847, and the deadlines had been arranged with surgical cruelty pay within 48 hours or face municipal court. I spread the notices across my kitchen table and studied them the way I would study a bad contract: sequential dates, precise timestamps, photographs with angles only a trespasser would take. Someone who had walked through the house knew exactly where to point the camera. That was the first real punch. This wasn't spite. This was a business model wearing a blazer and a name badge. I started talking quietly to neighbors. Linda Moore, 3 houses down, admitted. She says judges always side with HOAs, says she knows how to handle troublemakers. Dorothy Green, who's lived on the block forever, told me about the Harris family forced out last year after months of escalating citations and fines. They sold at a loss and moved out of state. Their names stuck with me like a warning: people who resist get financially ground to dust. I felt that first fracture then, a little terror that maybe I'd miscalculated. Maybe this was larger than petty harassment. Maybe it was a system that crushed anyone who resisted. My stomach curled the night the social media post went up: Evelyn's smiling headshot, a casual line about protecting property values, and a flood of comments painting me as an entitled neighbor, a man abusing resources to dodge reasonable rules. My phone buzzed with messages from people who preferred not to stick their necks out. Fear had done its work. For a long day, I sat on the couch and thought about just paying, about cutting my losses and letting them have my money rather than my peace. I wondered if I was the problem. Had my garden been out of line? Had I missed some obscure covenant amendment? I almost let myself believe the paperwork was real, and I was simply slow to comply. That's the ugly truth about intimidation. It makes you doubt the ground beneath your feet. But something else was also true. The pattern didn't smell like enforcement. It smelled like revenue. The notices were too specific, the timing too consistent, the photos taken when houses were empty. It was targeted. Oak Ridge Property Management showed me access logs after I pushed them the maintenance key labeled Main 07, appearing at 18 different addresses over 8 months, almost always midday. No emergency calls logged. No health complaints filed. It looked like authorized access until you saw the pattern. Suddenly, the $500 wasn't a number to intimidate, it was a line item on a ledger. I started building my own ledger. I put up 3 cameras. Front door driveway, side access, all legal, all signed with property under video surveillance placards. I called it insurance, but the cameras were also a strategy. Documentation beats intimidation. I canvassed neighbors quietly. 8 of 15 had their own stories, but few had the stomach for a fight. "We can't afford lawyers," one family said. Another warned of city connections. Fear had been Evelyn's best ally. Then came the escalation I'd feared. Evelyn arrives with Mark Reynolds, a city code officer in a navy jacket, and Susan Blake, a clerk, carrying municipal forms stamped with a city seal. Mark reads a statute number aloud, 247 to B, and insists emergency health inspections don't require warrants. He hands me documents that look official enough to make a jury of my neighbors nod. Suddenly, the harassment had municipal muscle. Suddenly, contesting it felt like accusing a whole town of a crime. I remember pacing hands flat on the countertop, counting the ways the system could smother me. There were nights I couldn't sleep. There were days I considered walking away, changing my phone number, selling the house, and disappearing. I remember kneeling on the floor looking at the stack of notices and asking myself quietly and almost shamefully, am I making this into more than it is? Am I crazy? That moment of wanting to give up, that was the low point. But it was also the turning point. When you strip emotion down to nothing, a cold calculus remains. Patterns beget leads. And leads, if you follow them, lead to exposure. I followed the money. I followed the timestamps. I followed the maintenance logs. And I found neatly typed in bank transfers and consulting invoices, evidence of kickbacks. Payments routed through friendly accounts described as administrative services, all small enough to avoid scrutiny, but large enough aggregated to be meaningful. I set my bait. I placed my United States District Court briefcase leather with the gold embossed seal on my home office desk where whoever trespassed next would see it. I'd stopped trying to be anonymous in this fight. I needed Evelyn to miscalculate who she'd targeted. Friday morning she came as habitual as ever, clipboard under arm, real estate friend behind her. She moved through my office with that practiced stride, photographing, annotating. Then she saw the briefcase. The transformation was immediate confidence to ash. "Oh my God! Wait, is that a federal judge?" she whispered, clipboard clattering, breath gone. For a breathless second she staggered, then clawed for power the way predators do when cornered. "You can't do anything. This is municipal, not federal. Mark Reynolds still has authority." I stepped out from behind the file cabinet. I kept my voice low and very, very steady. "You didn't read the statutes that matter," I said. "You committed crimes under color of authority. Those are federal offenses. The FBI has jurisdiction." Her face emptied. Confusion buckled into panic. Then she talked, and when Evelyn panics, she becomes a faucet, names, dates, amounts, the whole ugly choreography. "James made me do it. Susan handled the paperwork. We collected fees and distributed them." She blurted fingers, trembling eyes frantic. It was everything I needed. The tape on my camera caught every frantic syllable. Her confession was chaotic, but it was a confession. She offered to cooperate, to wear a wire, to pay restitution, bargaining like someone trying to save herself by sacrificing others. I told her to leave, told her any further contact would be a new charge, and I called the number I'd promised myself I'd never dial lightly. Within hours, agents were at my door. Within days, investigators were executing warrants, seizing records, freezing accounts. At a community emergency meeting, I laid out the timeline. The footage, the maintenance logs, the bank entries, and then, for transparency, I told them who I was. "I am a United States District Judge," I said. And the room changed temperature. Evelyn's meltdown became public evidence. She named names. She detailed the kickback scheme. She provided the sentence fragments that became indictments. They voted to remove her from office on the spot. They voted to cooperate with federal investigators. I stopped the narrative there at the moment she was stripped of authority and her network began to unravel. I closed the file and handed it to the agents. The rest was an institutional thing, warrants, charges, plea deals that I left to the process. I don't stay on stage for the curtain call. What stayed with me was simpler and harsher people can use the power of stationery and a blazer to terrify an entire neighborhood, but a single thread of evidence pulled patiently can unravel a whole tangle. Evidence matters. Courage matters. Fear is contagious, but so is the choice to stand. Justice, in this case, started with documentation and ended because someone stopped being afraid. Lesson: keep records, ask questions, and don't let official-sounding people into your house without proof.